Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our webinar when we will cover our latest report on trends and insights on OT and IoT cybersecurity, the review of the first half of this year. And today, the hosts of this webinar is Alexey Kleimenov, who is a threat intelligence manager at Nozomi Networks, and me, Anton Shipulin, who industrial cybersecurity evangelist with Nozomi Networks as well. Today, we will cover such topics as the key events during this half of the year and also the highlights from the threat landscape, such as the top intrusion alerts, industry insights, regional insights, botnets activity, and some kind of predictions in high-level trends in cybersecurity threats for critical infrastructure. And to start off, we will start with key events such as incidents and threat actors, as well as the key governance and compliance events in the industry. Talking about the incidents and threat actors, this time, we see the rise of nation-state threats on OT. If early we also saw the the attacks from nation-state to critical infrastructure, but most of the time it was based. They targeted the data. The main goal was the data stealing and espionage. This time we see increasing interest into sabotage activities, into control system, and such threat actors as World Typhoon attacking US and Africa and critical infrastructure. There is actors actors during the Israel-Hamas war, UNC 1549. We see new activity from Sandworm, APT44 threat group there, actively targeting critical infrastructure. In this January, for example, they attacked the water tower in Texas in the US. We see the Arkandor activity, they attacking the critical infrastructure via the vulnerabilities in border network devices such as VPN gateways, the firewalls, and so on. As well, we see the activities of groups that targeting the control system via the protocols or using the living of the land techniques. For example, if we saw this behavior in enterprise, it's not a secret. The threat actors have been using the living of the land techniques for a long time. Now we see they do the same for OT, and the example is the Frosty Group activities in Ukraine. They attacked the civilian infrastructure and so on. So it's again just a reminder that nation state is getting more focused on OT sectors, not only the espionage but also the impact of this part of the network. Another activities, we see the rise of hacktivists. They're claiming targeting more OT. For example, there was a blackjack group who claimed cyber attack on Moss Collector company in Russia with tailored Foxnet malware to disrupt sensors within OT network. No real damage was confirmed, but it was based on the claims of hacktivists. They showing that they tailor the attack for specific equipment in OT network. And of course, for many years, we see ransomware is the top reason of attacks for manufacturing with millions of dollars of financial impact. We see activities of Lockbit, even after the law enforcement agency, they disrupted the infrastructure, but set it up again. Reseda, Play, Alfie, and many others attacking hundreds companies critical infrastructure globally. And on the other side, we see the key events on governance and compliance in all over the world. The most notable on the screen. This year, NIST published the new NIST cybersecurity framework, and they updated the requirements, they updated the mapping to regulations, to other standards, and they added new governance functions in their famous framework, which is the significant change in the framework to elevate all the cybersecurity risk management activities to the C-suite and board level. We see updates in the famous OT cybersecurity set of standards ISA IEC 62443. This time, the part 2-4 was updated. It was second edition released, the security program requirements for ICS service providers, and also the additional evaluation methodology for this standard was published. It's a good thing. This standard is just additional resource for people who are thinking about the supply chain risk management. It's additional support for these initiatives. And the big news in the Europe this year, this first half of the year, the European Union approved the Cyber Resiliency Act. It's a legal cybersecurity framework for any products with digital elements. And this is basically applies for products starting from consumer electronics to industrial control system, IoT system, and so on. And for all, it covers manufacturers, distributors of the systems, and basically all systems that is produced in the European Union or delivered to this area should comply with this act and should have cybersecurity measures in place. And another interesting update from the Europe this year that the new network codes on cybersecurity for electricity sector were published. This is basically regulation for transmission system operators and distribution system operators. So another example of regulation for energy industry, in addition, for example, to NERC-CIP in the US. And from here, I would like to give this presentation to Alexey. Alexey,
thank you, Anton. I'll take over from here. So now let's talk more about our report. So here at Nozomi, we carefully evaluate the cybersecurity posture in the 5 to 6 months period every year. So this report is biannual, as some of our readers may know already. And every time we carefully look at various aspects of cybersecurity, including botnet activity, vulnerability landscape, and the information coming from our anonymized telemetry. And we see what has changed and how it affects the global order. So here are some of the report's highlights. We're going to dive deeper into each of them in the next few minutes. But overall, on the ICS vulnerability side, researchers across the globe remain active. In total, 134 new advisories were released by CISA over the period covering January 1 to end of May, where 842 vulnerabilities in total were mentioned. These vulnerabilities were affecting 49 different OT vendors whose products have been used across the globe in many industries across multiple countries. So we're going to look into details a bit later. Speaking about telemetry coming from our customers, we always keep an eye on what are the top alerts raised across the globe, how it changes over time, how much different industries, different countries are affected to a certain extent by them. And here we present the global view. So over this period, you can see that the top alert that our customers received the most was illegal parameters request. These detections cover various anomalies within OT devices communicating between each other or HMI workstations. And in this particular case, as you can see, that as much as close to 20% of all alerts were attributed to this particular activity that generally may or may not possess a threat depending on your particular environment. Malformed traffic takes the second place this time, taken as much as 15.5% of all alerts, followed closely by TCP flood and network scan activity. Speaking about botnets, finally, you can see that the situation is the following. Overall, the highest number of attacks were reported from devices originating in China. Again, here we should be clear that these are devices initiated the attack. We we perform geolocation based on mapping IP addresses and associated countries. It literally means that the affected device was hosted there. It doesn't necessarily mean that attackers are located in China themselves. And second place is taken by the United States. Finally, again, quick teaser here, speaking about vulnerabilities reported over this period, the top industries are something we are always interested in to make sure we are able to constantly use this actionable information to prioritize our research, to prioritize our detections. And here, again, top 5 entries are the following: critical manufacturing, energy, transportation, water and wastewater, and commercial facilities. This is a quick intro for those of you who either haven't read the report yet or already did it a while ago and needed a quick refresher. Now let's talk a bit more about each of these topics. So, intrusion alerts. Why it is important? Why people should care? Basically, telemetry allows us to collect viable information from the field. These are real attacks happening to real companies, and being aware of what's going on in the OT sector may help you prioritize your cybersecurity planning and tune your products accordingly. So I have already covered the top 4 events. As you can see, there are many more alert types that our products rise, including new link group, clear text password, multiple access denied events. We map each of them to the corresponding category to make sure we can make some bold guesses, assumptions, predictions, and draw conclusions based on how they change over time. What I would like to emphasize is that it's not that matter how often the alerts is raised as such, because each of them may represent a threat ongoing to your particular environment. Knowing your environment is what makes a difference. What may be absolutely normal for one company may be different for another one. In this case, our products provide great possibilities to fine-tune it to your particular use case, making sure that the noise is minimal and only the most actionable and useful information is being reaching the people corresponding to monitoring the cybersecurity posture. Now let's take a look at how the alerts distribution look like for different industries. Here we took a look at what was the number of alerts affecting our customers across the globe, and then we aggregated it, making sure we're focusing on industries which produce the highest number of alerts per customer. Once again, per customer means that we're no longer biased to how many customers we have in different industries, in different regions. Here, the data was average, so that only the industries associated with the highest number of alerts per customer are being highlighted here. In this case, you can see that the industry was affected the most, which produced the highest number of alerts during this period, was industrial machinery and equipment. It was by building materials, chemicals and related products, custom software, and no surprise, electricity, oil and gas that commonly pops up in our top 5 chart. Looking at the right, you can see the distribution of different alert types for different industries. Here, if you're interested in more details, please take a look at the report. In this case, for the sake of simplicity, during the webinar, we highlight only 2, so that you can compare the 2 different industries, and you can see clearly that the numbers are very different. This, again, emphasizes the importance of knowing your industry, knowing which attacks may be specific to it. Different industries use different devices. They have different data flows, different policies. That's why it's extremely, extremely important to make sure that, first of all, your cybersecurity solution knows about these differences and is able to handle all of these different scenarios. And secondly, make sure that cybersecurity products are fine-tuned to your particular use case. In this case, more flexibility is provided, coupled with automation to assist engineers in doing it, the better. Looking at regional insights, we see exactly the same picture. Again, here the data was aggregated across countries, and here we're looking at the top countries producing the highest average number of alerts. Average means per customer, to avoid bias towards the number of customers in each country. And as you can see, the top 5 countries produced the highest number of alerts per country were Italy, Spain, Colombia, Sweden, and the United States. Looking at the distribution, we see very similar picture. Sometimes, for different countries, the same alert type is the most prevalent one, but in any case, the top 5 will look different. For some countries who have a strong posture on OT or ICS environment, this threat may take prevalence. For other countries, more generic network anomalies, attacks, authentication, password-related issues can become a more serious threat compared to others. Now, let's talk about vulnerabilities in particular. In the previous example, we talked about information which we collect from our customers participating in the anonymized telemetry sharing. Here, we are talking about aggregating, summarizing, and processing information coming from CISA. So once again, you have already seen these numbers. You know already that for this period, critical manufacturing was affected the most, followed by energy, transport sector, water waste, and commercial facilities. In some cases, different industries use the same devices, which means one vulnerability affects all of them more or less equally. In other cases, industries may use proprietary devices fine-tuned only for their particular use case, like energy management or water controls or tracking different vehicles. In this case, of course, the corresponding devices will be different, and the associated vulnerabilities which researchers across the globe discover will be unique only to them. Finally, let's talk about botnets. Unlike the previous 2 cases, when we looked at telemetry in the first case and looked at the aggregated CISA advisories in the second case, here the information is coming from our research project. This is a chain of globally distributed IoT honeypots, which are open for everybody to initiate the attack. And this is a very efficient way how we can constantly monitor the number of attacks, where they originate from, collect payloads, and turn it into actionable data by providing daily detections to the customers of our threat intelligence subscription. In this case, the top 10 countries are the following. The leaders are China and Hong Kong. Here, the statistics were mixed together for these 2 locations. United States took the 2nd place, and India is the 3rd. The biggest change in this pie chart compared to the previous period was Japan. Surprisingly, Japan went up and it's an alarming sign, in my opinion. Basically, usually big changes in the distribution of countries may mean that accidentally more devices have been compromised over the same period of time as before. So it may be definitely something paying attention to. But overall, in this case, as you can see, the number of smart devices which are present in the country obviously plays a role. For big countries like China and the United States, where the level of automation is high, the vulnerability landscape is big. There are many devices which may be affected, and the total numbers matter. It doesn't necessarily mean that the China and the United States have weaker cybersecurity posture than Brazil or Japan. No. The number of devices potentially susceptible to the attack plays a big role in this case. On top of that, we constantly monitor the activity of different botnets, regardless of where they come from. In this case, big spikes and big drops are something that are of our biggest interest. Big spikes may indicate the appearance of new botnets or big upgrades of existing botnets, while downward movements may indicate the shutdown of operations for some botnets, whether they're permanent or temporary. Of course, we can tell only by taking a closer look at what's going on. This is how we monitor the situation and make sure that any important spike has been addressed. And in parallel, regardless of whether spikes are taking place or not, every day we receive actionable information, URLs, domains, IP addresses, file hashes, and all the secondary metadata we can extract from them. Again, becomes part of our offering to make sure that our customers are protected daily against ongoing malicious activity. Thank you very much. Passing it back to you, Anton.
Thank you, Alexei. And to kind of sum up our presentation and to give additional insights on the trends and prediction, what's going on in the critical infrastructure and cybersecurity, I would like to highlight these points. First of all, also we see the increase in insider-based threats, the skill shortage in future, the lots of human errors. We see the fake remote workers during the digital transformation, during the COVID time, and many bad actors, they use this capability to get access to critical infrastructure. And this is also the part of big challenge, which is supply chain compromise. And we see the dependencies, many companies, including in critical infrastructure, on cross-border digital providers, and they're getting a single point of failure. We saw the recent example with the cybersecurity vendor that caused a big downtime for many industries and critical infrastructure. So we will see also the increase in continuous financial motivated and digital currency enabled cybercrime, like ransomware encryption, data stealing, downtimes, and see the threat to AI and machine learning based system, as well as the AI and machine learning based cyber attacks enabled by machine learning algorithms. So the attack will be accelerated, there will be deep fakes. We see that the plausible phishing and so on. And it's also true for critical infrastructure. More wireless communications involved in a cyber attack, being as a target and as a threat, the satellite infrastructure as a target, the unmanned aerial vehicles also in due to their increasing role in military and industrial operations. Also the area of cyber threat landscape At the same time, we see the, it seems like a good things, growing national critical infrastructure regulation, but it also a threat for companies because of additional fines and penalties and additional increase in spending and investment. So it's important to keep in mind this threat. And this is not something very close in terms of time now, but there is a discussion in the industry as a future quantum computing based attacks for breaking encryption methods. We see the attackers, they're stealing data and saving it for future decryption, and we see that recently, for example, NIST published new encryption algorithms that should withstand the quantum computing based attack. And some officials, US officials, for example, say that to implement this new encryption methods, it will take like 10-15 years. So it's important now for companies start thinking about asking their technology providers, system providers, how they are protected against future, how they planning to be protected about against this cyber attack in the future. It's a long-term problem, but it's important to start thinking about that right now. And I think that's it for today. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please send it to us. From our side, thank you for coming. Thank you for watching our webinar, and looking forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you, everybody. We invite everybody to take a look at our report, and we're looking forward to hearing your feedback. It was a big pleasure.